All praise to the Most High, Ahaya, and to His Son, Yeshua, the Messiah. Hallelujah. This is Brother Holly here with the second Spirit of Truth broadcast here on the AHAYAH'S channel, as well as the House of Ahaya channel on this set-apart Sabbath day. First of all, I'd like to say all praise to the Most High for another glorious opportunity to come and speak to you, His children, and to join in with you around the reading and studying of His Word. Hallelujah. On the first broadcast, we went over in our series of the covenants of Ahaya, we went over the covenant that the Most High made with Isaac and the covenant the Most High made with Jacob. Now, we're going to continue studying the covenants that the Most High made. But I noticed something in preparation for this second broadcast, that there was a covenant made between the covenant he made with Jacob and the covenant that he made with Moses on the mount. And that covenant was around the Passover as well as the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And it's not so much just announcing that these feasts were to take place, but the Most High was setting up a covenant around these two events. And as I mentioned in the first broadcast, and I'll say it again here, that in my time of studying this particular subject, I began to realize there were a lot more covenants than meets the eye, so to speak, that the Most High was making with the children of Jacob. From the time that he made the covenant with Abraham, he only made covenants with the children of Jacob from that point forward. He made a covenant with Abraham. He made a covenant with Isaac and his seed, which would be Jacob. And he made a covenant with Jacob and his seed, which would be us. Hallelujah. And that covenant goes all the way through to the new covenant. And the new covenant has aspects of it that are part of the everlasting covenant, which goes all the way into eternity. Hallelujah. So we're going to look in the Nazarene version. Excuse me for scratching my nose. In Shemot, or Exodus chapter 12. And let's start reading at verse 1. And Ahai spoke to Moses and Aaron in the land of Mizraim, or Egypt, saying, This month is the beginning of months for you. It is the first month of the year for you. Speak to all the congregation of Yasharel, saying, On the 10th day of the Yom of this month, each one of them is to take for himself a lamb, according to the house of his father, a lamb for a household. And if the household is too small for the lamb, let him and his neighbor next to his house take it according to the number of beings, according to each man's need. You make your count for the lamb. Let the lamb be a perfect one. A year-old male, take it from the sheep or from the goats, and you shall keep it until the 14th Yom, or the 14th day of the same month. Then all the assembly of the congregation of Yasharel shall kill it between the evenings. Verse 7. And they shall take some of the blood and put it on the two doorposts and on the lintel of the houses where they eat. And they shall eat the flesh on that evening, roasted in fire with unleavened bread, and with bitter herbs they shall eat it. Do not eat it raw. Verse 9. Nor boil at all with water, but roast in fire its head with its legs and its inward parts, and do not leave of it until morning. And what remains of it until morning you shall burn with fire. Now the Most High is giving preparation for the Passover lamb. You can take it from the sheep or the goats. You got to be a male, got to be perfect. You take the blood, you put on the doorpost over the lintel of the house in which you're having this meal in. And this is a meal of roasted lamb, be it from the sheep or the goats, unleavened bread, and bitter herbs. And he's going to go on to say even more definitions on how this meal is supposed to go. But he also said you roast the head, you roast the inward parts, you roast the legs, and you don't leave any of it until morning. And if there's any leftovers, you burn it with fire. And we'll see where this is a covenant in a moment. Verse 11. This is Exodus chapter 12, verse 11. And this is how you eat it. Your loins girded, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand. And you shall eat it in haste. It is the Passover of AHAYAH. So, how many of you have seen these Passover meals where people are sitting down eating? I have. I've seen the fakers sitting down eating Passover meal. And I've seen the fakers adding to the Passover menu fish and other things that were not mentioned here. The Passover menu is very, 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 very basic and simple. And it's supposed to be basic and simple. You roast the lamb, you have unleavened bread, bitter herbs, you eat it holding your walking stick in your hand, shoes on, your coat on, your loins girt, everything, you're ready to go. Like you walking out the door, you eat it fast. You don't sit and eat it, you stand and eat it. Let's keep reading. I read verse 11 again. Exodus 12:11. And this is how you eat it. Your loins girt, your sandals on your feet, your staff in your hand, and you shall eat it in haste. It is the Passover of AHAYAH. And I shall pass through the land of Mizraim on that evening, and shall smite all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and on all the mighty ones of Mizraim or Egypt I shall execute judgment. I am the great I am. Verse 13. And the blood shall be a sign for you on the houses where you are. See, there is a token or the sign of the covenant he's making. When the Most High sees the blood, that's the sign of the covenant he's made between the children of Yasharal and himself. The Egyptians weren't given these instructions. The mixed multitude wasn't given these instructions. The Sabians, none of these other people. These were strict instructions given by Moses and Aaron, by the Most High, through Moses and Aaron to the children of Yasharal for their use and for their deliverance. I'll read verse 13 again, Exodus 12:13. And the blood shall be a sign for you on the houses where you are. And when I see the blood, I shall pass over you. Hallelujah. And let the plague not come on you to destroy you when I smite the land of Mizraim. And this yom shall become to you a remembrance, and you shall observe it as a festival to AHAYAH throughout your generations. Observe it as a festival and an everlasting law. So, the Passover is a festival and a law, and it is part of the everlasting covenant. Why? How do we know that? Because it said that we're going to do this for how long? Forever, throughout our generations, for an everlasting law. We're always going to do this. I'll read that verse 14 again. Exodus 12:14. And this yom, or this day, shall become to you a remembrance, and you shall observe it as a festival to AHAYAH throughout your generations. Observe it as a festival, an everlasting law. Yamim, or days, you shall eat unleavened bread. Indeed, on the first yom, or first day, you cause leaven to cease from your houses. For whosoever eats leavened bread from the first yom until the seventh yom, that person shall be cut off from Yasharal. And on the first yom is a set apart congregation or assembly. And on the seventh yom, you have a set apart congregation. No work at all is done on them. So Now we're into the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which is the very next day. The first day after the Passover is the beginning of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. You got to get all the leaven out of your house. You didn't need leaven to make the Passover bread because you're supposed to eat unleavened bread for the Passover. So you got to get all the leaven out of your house, and you begin to eat the unleavened bread. And the first day and the seventh day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread are Sabbaths. No work is to be done. I'll read verse 16 again. And on the first Yom is a set apart assembly. And on the seventh Yom, you have a set apart assembly. No work at all is to be done on them, only that which is eaten by every being. That alone is prepared by you. So you can make food on these Sabbaths, but that's the only work you can do. Excuse me, my nose is itching something fierce. And you shall guard the festival of unleavened bread, for on this same Yom or day I brought your divisions out of the land of Mizraim, and you shall guard this day throughout your generation, an everlasting law. So here is another covenant, or another part of the everlasting covenant that the Most High made. It's something we got to do forever. It's for an everlasting law. It's part of that covenant. Verse 18, in the first month and on the 14th day of the month, in the evening you shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month in the evening. For 7 days no leaven is to be found in your homes. If anyone eats what is leavened, that same person shall be cut off from the congregation of Yasharal, whether it be a sojourner or a native in the land. So these laws apply not only to the homeborn, but to those who are amongst us. Someone just passing through. They can't eat leavened bread either. Do not eat that which is leavened in all your dwellings. You are to eat unleavened bread. Verse 21. And Moses called for all the elders of Yasharal and said to them, go out and take lambs for yourselves according to the clans, and slaughter the Passover lamb. And you shall take a bunch of hyssop and dip it in the blood that is in the basin, and strike the lintel and the 2 doorposts with the blood that is in the basin. And none of you shall go out of the door of his house until morning. And AHAYAH shall pass on to smite the Mizraeans, or the Egyptians, and shall see the blood on the lintel and on the 2 doorposts. And AHAYAH shall pass over the door, and not allow the destroyer to come into your homes to smite you. And you shall guard this word as a law, and you and your sons forever. And it shall be when you come to the land which AHAYAH gives you, as he has promised, that you shall guard this service. And it shall be when your children say to you, what does this service mean that we do? Then you shall say, verse 27, and you shall say, it is the Passover of AHAYAH, who passed over the houses of the children of Yasharal in Mizraim, when he smote the Egyptians and delivered our households. And the people bowed their heads and did worship. Verse 28, and the children of Yasharal went away and did so as AHAYAH had commanded Moshe and Aaron. So they did. And it came to be at midnight that AHAYAH smote all the firstborn of the land of Mizraim, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sat on his throne to the firstborn of the captive who was in the dungeon, all the firstborn of livestock. And Pharaoh rose up in the night, and he and all his servants and all of the Egyptians, and there was a great cry in Egypt, and there was not a house where there was not one found dead. Wow. So the Most High takes the Passover very seriously. He basically destroyed the next generation of Egyptians so that his people could go free. So when it says in the book of Isaiah that he gave Egypt as a ransom for you, Jacob, he did. He destroyed a whole generation of Egyptians so that we could go free. Not only of the Egyptian people, but their livestock as well. Verse 31. Then he called for Moses and Aaron by night, that's Pharaoh, and said, Arise, go out from the midst of my people, both you and your children of Yasharel, and go and serve Ahai as you have said. Take both your flocks and your herds as you have said, and go. Then you shall bless me too. And the Egyptians urged the people to hasten to send them away out of the land, for they said, We are all dying. And the people took their dough before it was leavened, having their kneading bowls bound up in their garments on their shoulders. And the children of Yasharel had done according to the word of Moses, and they had asked from the Egyptians objects of silver, objects of gold, and garments. And Ahai gave the people favor in the eyes of the Egyptians, so that they gave them what they asked, and they plundered the Egyptians. And the children of Yasharel set out from Ramesses to Succoth, about 600,000 men on foot, besides the little ones, and a mixed multitude went up with them. Hallelujah. So, the Most High made a covenant with the children of Yasharel, the covenant of the Passover. They were to take a lamb from amongst their herds of sheep or goats of the first year, unblemished, perfect. They were to slaughter it and to take hyssop, put it up on the doorpost and across the lintel of the door, and when the Most High saw the blood, he would pass over you, and that the destroyer would not enter your home and take the life of the firstborn, as the destroyer did in all the land of Egypt, except where the Passover covenant was cut. And this was to be a sign between the Most High and the children of Yasharel forever, that the Most High chose to pass over us because of our obedience. We followed his word. We obeyed the covenant, and he kept his part of the covenant. And we're to keep this as a festival and a feast throughout our generations. Yes, this is a covenant. And since it's throughout our generation and a forever law, it is part of the everlasting covenant. We are to keep the feast of the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread forever. Hallelujah. And if a stranger or a sojourner was amongst us, if they didn't want to die, they had to put the blood on the door too. And we can read a little bit further into Exodus, where it says a sojourner that's uncircumcised can't eat of that. You got to be holy unto AHAYAH to eat of it. If you're uncircumcised, you can't have any. Just like you shouldn't take communion, which is part of the new covenant. But communion doesn't last forever. Remember the instructions that we are to do that until Messiah comes. We're to show forth his death until Messiah comes. So there'll be an ending to communion. But there's no ending to observing the Passover throughout our generations. Hallelujah. We're to eat the meal of the Passover. That's the observance. To eat the meal of the Passover. And we're to eat it as instructed in the scriptures, not according to our traditions. And we find out later on in our readings in the scriptures that the Passover is meant to only be kept at one place, and that's Jerusalem. That we're to do what we can to be in Jerusalem so we can celebrate the Passover. Messiah celebrated the Passover in Jerusalem as the word instructed. Hallelujah. So we see a lot of these Passover celebrations happening today in our captive state. And I question the legitimacy of it. Now I know that the scriptures tell us in Romans chapter 4, where there's no law, there's no transgression, but there is a law. about where, not only how, but where Passover can be celebrated. But we're to allow people to be persuaded in their own minds about these things. So I say unto you, children, yes, we're supposed to practice the righteous acts, or rehearse the righteous acts, as it says in the prophets. That we will come to ourselves in the lands of captivity and begin to rehearse the righteous acts. Begin to keep the feast with sincerity and with truth. And I'm not bringing this up to put you in bondage. I'm bringing this up to set you free, to let you know that this is part of our heritage. This is a covenant the Most High made with our forefathers and foremothers. And we are to keep it throughout our generations. But to keep it, you must keep it right. You must eat this meal standing up with shoes on your feet, your coat on, walking stick in your hand, as the scriptures declare. And we're to eat it in a hurry. It's not a sit-down meal. We're to eat it in a hurry. And if there's any left, we're to burn it the next morning. Don't cook too much. Eat it all. And show your compliance to the Most High's covenant that He made with us. That He continues to make with us. As He said in His word, when you see the blood, He'll pass by you. When you see that blood applied to your life, the blood of Yeshua, His Son, applied to your life, cleansing you of all sin, then He'll pass by you. Hallelujah. So we're under the covenant where Yeshua took the cup in His hand and said, this is the blood of the new covenant, which is shed for many. He didn't say for any. He said for many, for the remission of sins. And there's a covenant that will, as we go through this series, is the covenant of the Most High, AHAYAH, taking away the transgression of Jacob. I mean, that's exactly what He said. In that day, I will take away Jacob's transgression. That covenant was fulfilled by Messiah alone. Hallelujah. So let's recap. We're to keep the feast of Passover. We're to keep the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Throughout our generation, there's a covenant around it. And the sign is the blood, that He may pass over us. Hallelujah. And that blood is in the shed blood of His holy Son, Yeshua, our Messiah. Hallelujah. All praise to the Most High, AHAYAH, and to His Son, Yeshua, the Messiah. Hallelujah.